appreciative to have an audience with state utility commissioners because I believe we have the same end goal, and that is consumer satisfaction. The more I can inform you of what natural gas utilities are doing on the security front, the better we can partner towards achieving that end goal. That was not me. I was invited here to provide a comparative view of cybersecurity approaches in the natural gas and electric sectors, specifically from the natural gas utility perspective. Now, as most of you know, AGA represents more than 200 local energy companies that deliver natural gas throughout the United States. There are more than 72 million residential, commercial, and industrial natural gas customers in the U.S., of which 94% or over 68 million customers receive their gas from AGA members. So when I speak of the natural gas utility industry, I'm very confident that I'm speaking about the vast majority of the natural gas utilities that are out there domestically. AGA takes a holistic approach to cybersecurity by incorporating natural gas operations, cyber and physical security management, information sharing, knowledge transfer, and public-private partnerships all into one approach. This approach has been widely accepted by AGA's natural gas utilities as comprehensive, practical, and sensible. Again, I can speak to this personally since I not only oversee AGA security program from physical and cyber perspective, but I have had the good fortune of having built the AGA cybersecurity program from scratch back at the turn of the new millennium. So let's get started. Next slide, please, Miles. Two overarching categories for highlighting natural gas cybersecurity, especially as it relates to electricity subsector, are perspective and strategy. By providing some background on the threat landscape and current trends as seen through the eyes of the gas utility, you may better understand how decisions are made to address such risks. Truth is, we are all in the business of managing risk. Recognizing none of us, not the commissions, and certainly not the utilities, have unlimited resources, we best serve our customers by becoming aware of our leading risks and addressing those accordingly. Given the amount of attention on the growing interdependency of natural gas and electric, I will dedicate some time on this webinar to compare and contrast these two subsectors. This will further provide you the foundational knowledge to better understand how decisions are made by the natural gas utility as it applies to cybersecurity. Lastly, I will provide an overview of AGA strategy, which I touched on in the opening slide, which incorporates a holistic approach to cybersecurity that involves program assessment, education, and next.
Kimberly, it looks like we've had you drop off just a sec. I wonder if you could pause a moment. Yeah, we don't exactly have you just yet. Friends, sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm going to ask Kira from my staff to go make sure that we're not gobbling up the bandwidth on our end. Kimberly, can you try seeing if you've got it back right now? Okay. Well, while we sort this out, I'm going to do a quick swoop to the side. Andreas, I'm going to unmute you a second, and I wonder if you have anything else you'd like to add by way of introduction while we sort out the broken audio. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Andreas. You there, buddy?
Yes, I'm still here. I haven't given up.
Yes, you're clear as a bell, brother. So, Kimberly, I'm not sure what's causing the audio havoc, but we'll go ahead and try working it out on this end as well.
Folks, by the way, Kimberly is very well versed in the natural gas sector. She's been doing it for some time now, and she will also be participating in the San Diego meetings on Sunday, 4:15 to 5. It's a joint critical infrastructure gas committee meeting where we're going to talk about how the different sectors the similarities and the differences, and the subcommittee will join, the gas subcommittee will join the gas committee and the critical infrastructure committee. And, you know, it's funny sometimes we think that there are many differences between the sectors, yet at the end we're talking about the same problem, whether you know it's electric or gas. It's the exact same problems. So I'm waiting for Kimberly because she's the expert here. Neither Miles nor I are. We got her back. All right, Kimberly, go for it.
Make it work now.
I'm muting myself.
Thanks, Andreas. Let's give this a try again. And once again, I apologize for any of the technical difficulties. But I guess that just means you need to go to San Diego. Anyway, may I have the next slide, please?
And I guess one more past that. Oops.
The one that says threat landscape and current trends. You know what? I'm just going to work off of my notes, and everyone can imagine the slide. See, there it is. All right. The threat landscape and current trends. AGA and the Downstream Natural Gas Information Sharing and Analysis Center, also known as the DNG ISAC, held an AGA Situational Awareness Natural Gas Cybersecurity webinar at the start of this year, which provided a 2016 year in review of malware and activities relevant to natural gas operations. It gave projections of what to expect in 2017, such as ransomware, and highlighted and strongly encouraged the industry to apply Shodan to assess their Internet-facing electronics in this evolving world of the Internet of Things. High on our list of concerns is the specialized search engine Shodan. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this, it's spelled S-H-O-D-A-N, Shodan, which is designed to find critical infrastructure devices that can be accessed from the Internet. Though such a tool can be useful for gas operators to search and assess the risks of keeping their Internet-facing devices online, the software is also used by the bad guys to do the same. That is, find which of our Internet-facing devices may be critical to us and useful to them. Combined with other tools, specifically Metasploit, spelled M-E-T-A-S-P-L-O-I-T. I don't name these, I just repeat them. Metasploit, which is a software designed to automatically search for vulnerabilities in the Internet-facing devices. Combined, Shodan and Metasploit are great tools for the bad guys to find out the vulnerabilities and then to attack. And so we made a concerted effort to push it out in the industry that they should be implementing Shodan, the software. And it may be worthwhile for you to implement as well back on your office front to see what of your equipment, electronics, is Internet facing. And that would give you an idea of what all you have out there that could be vulnerable to malicious intent. Now, I'm sure everyone, as was mentioned earlier by Miles, is aware of the WannaCry worm, which is a powerful tool used to encrypt networks and then hold them for ransom. Ransomware is becoming a growing threat, as predicted by our DNG ISAC threat analysts at the start of the year. And gas utility operators are being encouraged to back up their data, and then back up their data. If you're constantly backing up your data, then if you are held ransom by this particular malware, you can just tell it to get lost. Specifically to WannaCry, I do want to say that this is a win for natural gas utilities, actually. When the DNG ISAC learned about this vulnerability, around the same time that the government intelligence community made it public that this vulnerability was out there, the DNG ISAC went into action to alert the natural gas industry participants, all of AGA's gas utility member companies and member companies of the Interstate Natural Gas Association of America, as well as the Canadian Gas Association. We alerted all of them and coordinated with all of them, and then went out with a broadcast to assess whether or not any of the domestic gas utilities had been impacted by the WannaCry malware. We were able to assess within 24 hours time that none of the domestic gas utilities had been impacted by that particular malware. The utilities continue to aggressively monitor, but this is such a great story that I'd like to share because it just goes to show how information sharing in such a trusted platform can be very useful for situational awareness. This was especially useful when media came out with mixed reports on who and what was being impacted by this domestically, and we were able to provide affirmation to our government partners that indeed it was not the gas utilities. Okay, so then the energy sector. Let's go on to compare and contrast the energy sector. Can we have the next slide, please? Thanks. The energy sector is directed by the Presidential Policy Directive 21 back in February 2013, consists of two subsectors. As Miles talked about earlier, we have the oil and natural gas subsector, and then we have the electricity subsector. Understanding the similarities and differences of the subsectors, for example, how they operate, how they are structured, and how they are regulated, allows us to capitalize on areas of overlap so to avoid reinventing the wheel, while also identifying challenges and planning for the interdependencies with sound technical information and valid assumptions. Andreas talked about differences. Indeed, there are differences. We all have the same end goal in mind, which is a more secure critical infrastructure, the assurance of safe and reliable energy delivery, and there are definitely similarities between electric and natural gas, but there will also be some differences that I will highlight later. Next slide, please. So under similarities, let's look at what I consider to be the greatest similarities out there. We both deliver our commodity directly into customers' homes and businesses. We are proudly part of the fabric of the communities we serve, and as such, have a strong sense of obligation to consumer safety and consumer satisfaction. We both belong to the larger energy sector, which fuels America's economy. We both recognize that with this distinction comes great responsibility, which is why we do not take security lightly. Electric and natural gas, we both depend on supervisory control and data acquisition, as well as control systems for system awareness and reliability. With this similarity, it should be noted that how we depend on these tools may differ, and the types of tools we use for this may differ. Some utilities may use SCADA, which is the supervisory control and data acquisition, only for monitoring, while others may use it to monitor and control. How the SCADA is used and how it is configured makes a difference as to the extent of a system's potential vulnerability. So just because you hear of a utility having SCADA doesn't necessarily mean that utility is going to be vulnerable to a cyber attack. As an aside, over 80% of AGA's member utilities are combination companies which provide natural gas and electricity service. So understanding the other commodity has become increasingly important. Next slide. Now we get into the differences. As you will see with this part of my presentation, the differences between natural gas and electric are not just numerous, but are also significant. Chemical properties to physical properties. They differ from transportation to operations. So let's get right into it. Chemistry 101. Anyone who has worked with me knows I go to great lengths to point out the fundamental difference between natural gas and electricity. Natural gas is molecules. Electricity is electrons. This may not seem like that big of a deal, but in science, these are worlds apart. Natural gas is a mixture of gases, but it's primarily made up of methane, which is one carbon atom surrounded by 4 hydrogen atoms. In the simplest of terms, each molecule of methane, each CH4, consists of 8 electrons. Electricity consists of atomic particles called electrons. Natural gas molecules are transported through pipelines under pressure traveling at an average speed of 15 to 20 miles per hour. Contrast this to electricity, which travels through power lines as electrons around the speed of light. I'm thinking of the childhood story, The Tortoise and the Hare. Both energy sources get to their destination. They just do so in different manner. Natural gas has the physical property of compressibility, which allows for operational flexibility. operators manage the internal pressure of the delivery system by controlling the amount of natural gas entering and leaving the system. The process of increasing or decreasing pressure happens relatively slowly in a natural gas system because of the compressible nature of the gas. This compressibility lessens the immediacy of impact and increases the probability of detection. Whereas the electric outage has an almost immediate impact on consumers, natural gas supply disruption, regardless of cause, through the benefit of extensive operator training for abnormal conditions and the benefit of proper flow management, can effectively be managed by the operator and not always noticed by the customer. Further, the inherent design of high-pressure and low-pressure gas delivery systems is mechanical by nature. Think of the Ukraine incident and how manual fallbacks saved the day. Natural gas is still in that era. Valves are also used for routing natural gas, including bypassing lines and bringing in alternate feeds. Modern infrastructure has control systems to help operate and monitor pipelines and its components to move the product in a reliable, efficient, and effective manner. Layered onto this control system architecture is overpressure protection devices, which kick in should the unlikely need arise to prevent the internal gas pressure from threatening the pipeline's integrity. Pipeline safety regulations and standards require that backup systems cannot be affected by the same incident that compromises the primary control system. Thus, fail-safes and redundancies must be independent of the cause of the primary mechanism's failure. These layers of protection on top of existing cybersecurity measures benefit the natural gas operator because the potential impact of compromise is either prevented or mitigated. Let's step down to grid. Unlike the electric grid, natural gas utilities are not interconnected in the same way. In other words, should a gas utility in Dallas be taken offline, there will not be a cascading effect causing Houston, Austin, or any of the other facilities in Texas or outside of Texas to be taken offline as well. And then let's talk about system diversity. From a cyber design perspective, natural gas functions are divided across an enterprise network as well as an operations network. Enterprise network tends to be your billing, your invoices, your basic corporate data, definitely important material, but separate from operations network, which tends to be your control system, your SCADA, and your pipeline monitoring. These two networks are isolated from each other, employ firewalls, and layer other tools and mechanisms to improve the prevention, detection, and mitigation of cyber penetration. Each utility has unique systems, and their networks are designed to accommodate the needs of their service territories. Again, not a one-size-fits-all, a lot of uniqueness. Next slide, please. AGA has board-level direction and support for pursuit of forward-thinking, proactive cybersecurity initiatives. We're very fortunate to have that, and as a result, we have been very out in front in trying to implement cybersecurity initiatives that make the most sense to the natural gas operator. AGA's cybersecurity strategy is straightforward. Expose natural gas utility operators to resources and tools for conducting cybersecurity assessments, increase cybersecurity awareness and education industry-wide, and forge solid partnerships with government and stakeholders in other critical infrastructure sectors with an interest in natural gas operations. Next slide. Natural gas utility cybersecurity assessment. AGA designed this program intentionally to encourage gas utilities of all shapes and sizes to conduct cybersecurity assessments. We evaluated the opportunities from multiple operator perspectives, that is, small utility capabilities and needs, medium-sized utility capabilities and needs, and large utility capability and needs. Recognizing medium to large utilities likely do not generally struggle with conducting cybersecurity assessments, we looked for a resource that could be easily used by small utilities, and that is how we came to partner with the Department of Energy in the development of the Oil and Natural Gas Cybersecurity Capability Maturity Model. The model was straightforward, and we were able to align it with the NIST cybersecurity framework, such that by going through the C2M2 exercise, a utility could confidently say it has implemented the framework. AGA is in its second year of facilitating regional workshops to help gas utilities step through this model and arrive at the end of the workshop with an assessment of their company's cybersecurity program maturity. Additionally, AGA has hosted well-attended workshops on cyber risk taxonomy and cyber threat analysis. Again, all of these initiatives are to encourage gas utilities to conduct cybersecurity assessments and advance their cybersecurity program maturity. Next slide, please. AGA cybersecurity education and awareness strategy is best summed up in the first bullet on this slide, AGA commitment to cyber and physical security. This one-page document outlines industry's continued commitment to improving security through voluntary actions that closely align with the TSA Pipeline Security Guidelines and the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. AGA has collected signed letters of commitment from AGA member companies. Of the approximately 2.2 million miles of natural gas pipelines operated by AGA members, nearly 90% of those miles are covered by operators that have signed letters of commitment. The remaining 10% are primarily municipalities that legally may not be able to sign such a commitment. Moving on, to better inform gas utility industry, AGA worked with its membership to identify leading cyber threats of concern to natural gas operations. Along with the list of leading threats, descriptive elements were provided for each, as well as mitigative measures. The leading cyber threat that was identified was the coordinated physical and cyber attack in combination. And so AGA focuses much of its security programs on this risk. A couple years ago, AGA stood up the Downstream Natural Gas ISAC to provide a trusted platform and community for natural gas utilities to share physical and cyber threat information. To date, participating companies include all AGA gas utilities as well as members of the Canadian Gas Association and INGA. The D&G ISAC collaborates with the Electricity ISAC, other ISACs, and the government intelligence community. The D&G ISAC also provides for its participating companies threat analysis, smart practices, and situational awareness directly relevant to natural gas operations. The next topic is cybersecurity contract procurement language. To encourage cybersecurity to be built into the acquisition process for equipment and services, AGA members developed a tool that helps the operator identify the appropriate contract language to address the cybersecurity concerns associated with that particular acquisition. This way, cybersecurity was more of a forethought rather than an afterthought. Regarding tabletop exercises, AGA, one of the ones more recently done, AGA led the participation of over 50 gas utilities last fall in a multi-sector, multi-incident, multi-company tabletop exercise that encompassed cybersecurity, physical security, operations, management, and gas control. The tabletop scenarios were based on real scenarios in other sectors, and were developed with input from the Department of Homeland Security. Now, to engage the C-suite senior executives, AGA biennially presents the Energy Delivery Cybersecurity Executive Summit. The purpose of the summit is to bring together leading executives from across the nation with a stake in natural gas energy delivery, including electric, oil, telecommunications, and finance. The objective of the summit is to engage government and private sector leaders to discuss cyber interdependencies, increase awareness of shared vulnerabilities, and continue our commitment to effective, coordinated strategies. This year will be the year of the next Cybersecurity Executive Summit. And actually, we are coordinating this year with the Canadian Gas Association, and in the works is to bring in the Mexican Gas Association so that we would be having the North American Energy Delivery Cybersecurity Executive Summit. Additionally, we engage industry with topical webinars, and on this other topic that seems to not get as much of attention as it should is cyber insider threat. In the works, you will find that we are collaborating with the Edison Electric Institute to establish a cyber mutual assistance program. And we are also working with our industry gas control community to ensure they understand their significant role in cybersecurity. Next. Miles. And of course, partnership. It is only through our partnerships can we stay ahead of this quickly evolving and morphing threat. Through opportunities with organizations such as NARUC, such as the Sector Coordinating Council, and directly with the government, can we remain on the offense. And in summary, Miles, natural gas utility cybersecurity is about keeping the right perspective and employing a strategy that keeps our utilities on the offense. There are similarities with our electric counterparts, but the differences are significant and should be well understood for effective policymaking. Pipeline systems are built with layers of protection driven by pipeline safety. These same protections reinforce the layers of cybersecurity protections intended to ensure system resilience and integrity. Natural gas utilities are actively engaged in cybersecurity initiatives and are not doing so because of regulations. Rather, they are doing this because it's smart business, and they depend on effective cybersecurity. As stated at the outset, state utility commissioners and gas utilities have the same end goal, consumer satisfaction. The more we can partner on the cybersecurity front, the better our chances of achieving that goal. Miles?
Kimberly, are you still there?
I am.
Yeah, great. That was fantastic. We've had a couple questions come in from folks who I can't unmute. So I am going to go ahead and ask a couple of the questions that have come in. Let me ask the rest of y'all who are on the phone. We have about we have a lot of folks on the line here, and I'm happy to start unmuting folks if you're interested or not, as you wish. But please, this is an opportunity to ask a lot of questions, get yourself oriented to where things are with the gas sector. If you want to send them in via the chat thing or the questions piece, I'm happy to do that. Tony O'Donnell from Montana, you have your hand raised, but you may want to use the questions function because for some reason I can't unmute you. Let me go ahead and there's a couple other folks as well. Let me go ahead and start just with a couple of the questions that have come in. The first one that came in that I thought was really good was, so we've had a couple high profile events in the last couple weeks and couple years, and this question wants to know, are there steps that the gas companies have taken that reflect things that they've learned from or responded to that arise from the cyber attack in Ukraine? And are there any things that the gas companies have done in response to the WannaCry attack? So I think you discussed a little bit of the WannaCry stuff, but I'm happy to hear more about that. I'm particularly interested in, did the gas companies do stuff in the wake of the Ukraine attacks or learn pieces from the Ukraine attacks, or can you talk about that at all?
So that's a really great question, and I'm glad that was asked because let's take it one at a time. Ukraine. So one of the things we learned about Ukraine, and I don't know if you recall, but I spoke back in February, and one of the things that I half jest about was the fact that gas is always getting a bad rep because we are not as on the cutting edge as the electricity sector. And so we have not automated everything. We still have manual operations, quite a few manual operations, and we're trained and qualified on those operations. And we can operate in a blind environment because what we do is we send folks out to the field to the critical valves and whatnot, and then we use the old-fashioned telephone and dial in everything. So you could almost say that because we are not so much on the cutting edge of technology in that way, it has served to our advantage because we can still operate our system manually. Also, because our system has fail-safes that are pneumatically operated, manually operated, and cannot fail in the same manner in which the first failure was caused. We have those protection mechanisms in place to help prevent overpressurization or such types of incidents. So with respect to Ukraine, I think what we're going to do is probably keep working towards cautiously moving towards automation, but not necessarily jumping on board without knowing that we have our cybersecurity tools and mechanisms in place, which is why that contract procurement language tool was timely and critical. And actually that was identified by the industry operators as, hey, you know, we are meeting with the vendors and they're saying, you tell us what you want in our systems and we'll put them in, and of course we'll charge you for it, but you tell us what you want. And so what we did was we developed a tool that helped the operators understand what it was that they needed to ask for. Now, with respect to WannaCry, I'm a little bit tickled by that, mainly because when that particular Microsoft software was announced a while back that it was not going to be supported anymore by Microsoft, and so patching was not going to be provided by Microsoft and whatnot, we at AGA and the Edison Electric Institute made a concerted effort to ensure our member gas utilities, I'll speak specifically to AGA, we made concerted effort to make sure our member utilities knew what vulnerabilities were going to be out there if they didn't address this, whether they would choose to change software or whether they would put other mechanisms in place to mitigate, detect and mitigate, but they needed to do something. And I believe when WannaCry came out, that helped demonstrate for us that they were listening. And also, I do believe that what we do following a lot of these types of incidents or malware is we have phone calls with the industry, such as the Shodan matter late last fall. We ended up having a phone call with industry that had about 80 participants on it. And we talked about, you know, this is how you can use Shodan. This is the benefits of it. This is how you can use Metasploit. These are the things you need to be careful about because Metasploit is a very powerful tool and you don't want to use it incorrectly. So we have built up a trusted community through the DNGI stack, through our relationships with our AGA members to work against the adversary. Does that help, Miles?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Let me steer up to the next question. Michael Rush, I'm talking sort of slowly in order to make sure that that you're ready to ask your question. But Michael Rush from Missouri had a question he wanted to ask. You there, Michael?
Yes, I am.
Fire away.
Okay, well, I'm actually, I was wondering about the Cyber Mutual Assistance Program because that's kind of come up in discussion here about how are you going to start that, and do you have a timeline and any information available on that?
Sure, Michael. Thanks for asking that. I was actually just in Columbia last week. Beautiful little town. The CMA, the Cyber Mutual Assistance Program, basically last year EEI and AGA decided to pursue the Cyber Mutual Assistance Program. What we were going to do is pursue them in parallel, find out what our uniquenesses were or areas where we could not overlap, and then figure out our areas where we could overlap. EEI has successfully worked through all the legal requirements associated with cyber mutual assistance and whatnot, and so now we are actually going to be collaborating with EEI so that we can pick up on their lessons learned and be able to develop it at AGA. This is something that we're just looking into the details of right now, so I probably wouldn't be able to give you an exact timeline other than probably the end of this year, early next year. We were pursuing it last year, but we decided of some other projects which we thought were more time sensitive and necessary, such as the commitment, because that was something where we felt it provided the executive level support that our operators were looking for in order to keep moving forward, as well as the government was looking to make sure that though we're operating in a voluntary environment, that we do have pen to paper, and that's exactly what the commitment was intended to do.
Nice. Armando DeLeon in Richmond. Are you there, Armando? I took you off mute. I can ask your question for you if we can't get this one working.
Hey, I'm here.
Fire away. Come on. Yeah, you sound great.
Good presentation, by the way. The question is, if we were to have a service interruption on one of the main supplier lines, how much capacity do we have in storage to keep electric generating stations going?
Oh, that is such a beautiful question. I so much appreciate that question. I'll say why. That's a complicated question, and the reason being is, let's say you have a pipeline that serves power gen, transmission line that serves power line gen, or even a gas utility that serves power gen. The first question that an individual needs to ask himself or herself in business continuity planning is that power gen contracted for firm or interruptible service? If it is contracted for interruptible service and there is a supply disruption, regardless of the cause, on the pipeline system, then you can almost guarantee that power gen is going to get dropped because it contracted itself for interruptible service. It decided that the risks for interruptible service were worth taking. If that power gen was contracted for firm service, then that is going to be something that would be determined between the gas supplier and the power gen, mainly because the gas supplier has an obligation, yes, to that firm service, but more so, that gas supplier has the obligation to its utility commissioners that have an expectation that residential and essential needs services are going to be met. And as you all well know, a pilot light going out because gas molecules are not getting to it is much more difficult to relight than just turning on the electricity. To reignite a pilot light, putting gas back into a pipeline system means, one, turning off all the meters, and then hydro testing the pipeline, then going out and inspecting the appliances, and then turning the gas meters back on individually. So the gas operator will make every effort possible to ensure that the residential and essential needs are met, even at the cost of some of its contracts. Now, again, it goes back to whether or not the power gen has firm contract or an interruptible contract. And one of the questions I've been asked, and I'm actually doing some exploration about this, is how many power generation plants out there have signed up for interruptible contracts, because they're the ones that are choosing to do that. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, because that's going to be very site-specific and very incident-specific.
What an interesting response. I think we're going to probably come back, and that's one of those questions that we're going to be like, no, but seriously, no, but really, to a lot of people out there.
Yeah, no, and that's why I love that question, because you'll get the same response from me every time, is that, it's complicated, because it's going to be very, very system specific. It's going to depend on, okay, let's just assume that power gen has firm service on it. It contracted for firm service. Okay, so now the question is, how much is that power gen going to be drawing off? Is it going to be drawing off just the bare minimum so it can provide its firm service contracts because it has firm service contracts on its end as well, or is it going to be drawing everything that's out of that system at that one moment? And then the other question is, does that particular pipeline that has gone out or supply been disrupted for whatever reason, are there alternate feeds that can feed into that system? So that's kind of like, that's why it's one of those scenario questions that you'd have to lay out all of the specifics first for me to be able to say yay or nay.
I think in addition, this probably flags for us that there is a whole line of investigation that we could get into on another day at another time about the relationship between the way the contracts process works in gas and what that means overarchingly when it interfaces with cybersecurity. Let me turn things over to the excellent Lynn Constantini of New Jersey. Lynn, are you there?
I am, Miles. Thank you. Kimberly, I do want to thank you for today's presentation. It was very well done. I really do appreciate the comparing and contrasting of the industries. The products are different, the delivery mechanisms are different, and even the consequences as a result of a cyber attack are different. But you did also draw some similarities that I'm curious about. So the threats generally are the same, the gas sector and the electricity sector, and the equipment is the same in many cases. The SCADA systems, the control systems, the monitoring systems. So my question really is about the dependency on the supply chain for those products. Is there, in your opinion, a dependency, a supply chain dependency for SCADA equipment and control equipment? And if so, how does that supply chain dependency affect response and recovery planning in your sector?
Okay, so that's a great question, and that it's a fresh question, and I appreciate that a lot. You always go with these challenging questions, Lynn. So supply chain dependency, we do rely on the same type of equipment. So that was where Andreas was talking about at the end of the day, there's those similarities. The question is going to be, how is the equipment used? And the other question about that is the equipment tends to not just be off the shelf. They're taken off the shelf and then they are manipulated, tweaked to accommodate the service territory for that particular operator, whether it be gas or electric, and the needs of that particular territory. So it's not necessarily where you could take SCADA from one gas utility and move it and put it into another gas utility. Sometimes there's benefits to that, because that's like saying if a robber is trying to break into your house, your lock will be slightly different than someone else's lock. So if he broke into someone else's house, that does not necessarily mean that he will be able to successfully break into your house. So there are those differences, even though they are the same vendor, same equipment underlying it all. I think there's also, you brought up supply chain, and that leads to another topic, which I believe government officials have a huge role in, and that is supply chain integrity. One of the efforts with the contract procurement language tool is to try to force the vendor to address cybersecurity at the outset, rather than it having to be a bump in the cord afterthought. Because of antitrust issues, we're limited in how much we can do to force that topic. But I believe that the government is more situated to be able to tell the vendors, you know what, there is a responsibility on your part for cybersecurity integrity in your equipment. Because I can guarantee you, if you ask the vendors, and I work very closely with the vendors and have a great deal of respect for them, but when you ask a lot of them, do you know where all of your chips and microprocessors and electronics are coming from, and can you ensure the cyber integrity of those? The answer is no. And so that puts the operator in a disadvantage right out of the chute.
Excellent, excellent question. So I've got a couple here that I'm going to do the asking for technical reasons. Here's one that I don't know, you should feel free to be like, this is above my pay grade if you want to.
I can take.
So, yeah, I'm asking this, I'll ask anything. So here it is. You'd mentioned the DNG ISAC, the Information Sharing and Analysis for this sector. The question that I got was that the EISAC for electricity seems to be a lot bigger and a lot more thoroughly staffed than the DNG ISAC. Is the DNG ISAC too small, under-resourced? Does it need to be better? And if it's not, then what explains the disparity between the EISAC and the DNG ISAC?
Sure. That's actually a very fair question. And I do get paid. I just don't think about it because I do thoroughly enjoy my job. So the EISAC has been in the works for how long now? I mean, they've been, I actually don't know how old the EISAC is, but I do know it's a lot older than the DNG ISAC. The DNG ISAC is pushing 2 years old. And we have, we're kind of the little engine that could. In that time, we were able to populate it to have well more than 200 member utilities and have a dedicated threat analyst that pretty much looks at the overwhelming influx of threat information and brings it down to the level of only that is relevant to natural gas operations. Is the DNG ISAC smaller than the EISAC? Yes. Is it funded much less than the EISAC? Yes. The EISAC is funded, I believe, through, it is a requirement to pay into NARUC. I don't know exactly how that funding mechanism is set up, but the DNG ISAC, the funding is not a requirement. It is provided as a benefit to the utility industry. And so there is a difference in the way the funding mechanism is set up. And hopefully the DNG ISAC does grow to be the little engine that turned out being the wow. But the hope there is that it's going to continue collaborating with the EISAC, and eventually down the line, maybe we can come together and form an energy ISAC rather than having to have separate ISACs. But with the way the funding mechanism is now, with the funding for the electricity ISAC going through NARUC and that mechanism, that doesn't necessarily work for the gas utilities. So that's why the differences, that's why the disparity, and I'm actually quite pleased and proud of the DNG ISAC and where it has come in such a short period of time.
Nice. Okay, well, this question follows on pretty closely from that. Tony O'Donnell up in Montana. Are all industry groups operating independently, or is there cross-industry cooperation, e.g., AGA, electric associations representing electricity, banking, telecom, water, government agencies, etc.? Like, how are all of these sectors doing information sharing, cross-pollinating, warning each other, building off of each other's best practices, etc.?
So that's a great question. That definitely requires more time than we have left, and I'll gladly speak to that more should the representative from Montana be in San Diego. But basically, yes. The quick answer to your question is yes. There is cross-sector coordination. For example, I received alerts from the railroads, and and theirs goes out to everyone, and that's because the railroad chairs the Partnership for Critical Infrastructure Security, which is basically a a council made up of all the sector coordinating councils, all the 16 critical infrastructure sector coordinating councils. The officers from those are on this particular council. And so there is that cross-sector coordination there. And then we have that partnership with the federal, at the federal level, with the government coordinating councils, where we work and share information. And then also sectors such as electric and natural gas, we have what's specifically referred to as the downstream energy coordination, which was something that was kicked off by AGA and EEI, the Edison Electric Institute, intentionally to address overlapping opportunities for gas utilities and electric utilities. And so yes, depending on where your area of expertise is or where your area of interest is, there is cross-sector coordination going on. Now, are we coordinating with the food vendors? No, not at this present time. But if we find that there is a need for do something like that, then we will go down that route. But right now, our main focus tends to be more the electricity subsector, the other parts of energy, telecommunications, finance, water, and then transportation.
Excellent stuff. President Moroz, I'm going to just take the audacious step of just saying, if I take you off of mute, if you're interested in saying anything to wrap things up for today.
Thanks, Miles. No, I don't really have much to add other than to say we talk regularly in the Critical Infrastructure Committee with our colleagues on the Gas Committee, on the Electric Committee, on the Water Committee, about the various interdependencies, and it's just a reflection that these issues are very compelling and they affect all industries and obviously go beyond even utilities to other industries outside the utility sector. And the only thing I'd like to do is thank everyone for participating to continue to draw attention to this, because these are compelling issues, will continue to be compelling issues, and the only way that we can meet the challenges from this kind of threat is by continuing to share information and to talk through the issues and where we can all be engaged in it and look for solutions, whether we're regulators or representatives of the industry. So I just want to thank everyone for turning their focus to these issues today.
Thanks, President Moroz. This was thanks to President Moroz and Andreas Thanos and Lynn Constantini, whose idea this whole thing was. I think this is going to be a really great area of joint exploration. So thank you to y'all for thinking of it and figuring out how to do it and letting us push this out. We'll be writing up a very brief and high level, kind of like we did this kind of summary. But if you have folks who are interested in learning more, you can steer them towards folks here at the NARUC staff and preferably towards coming out to San Diego to our NARUC meetings where we'll be exploring this further. Also, I'd like to thank the folks from AGA, especially Kimberly Denbow, for speaking today. Also to Kyle Rogers and Ashley Duckman for helping us figure out how to do this in a way where we could maximize our additional brain power on this stuff. So thanks to those guys for helping us do that. With that, I'm going to stop the recording now. Thanks for your time today. This concludes our webcast.